Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Martin Rivera. I'm the Senior Policy Counsel for the National Hispanic Media Coalition, and thank you for joining us for this episode of NHMC's Building Community. NHMC is a 36-year-old nonprofit civil rights organization founded to eliminate hate, discrimination, and racism towards the Latinx community. On today's episode, we wish to talk about the Affordable Connectivity Program and the lessons learned from the emergency broadband benefit. Luckily for today's panel, we have extraordinary leaders and advocates fighting to enroll as many households as possible to the ACP program and to close the digital divide. So please allow me to introduce you to Alejandro Roark, Chief of Consumer and Governmental Affairs for the Federal Communications Commission, Dr. Alisa Valentin, Senior Director of Technology and Telecommunications Policy for the National Urban League, and Emily Chi, Director of Telecommunications, Technology, and Media for Asian Americans Advancing Justice. Thank you so much for attending this panel. We really do appreciate it. As our audience may or may not know, on November 15th, 2021, President Biden signed into law the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which provided $65 billion to address the digital divide, including $14.2 billion for the FCC to administer the Affordable Connectivity Program. The ACP is the successor to the Emergency Broadband Benefit, or EBB, and which began on May 12th of 2021 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And it also made substantial discounts available to consumers for broadband services. The EBB ended in December 31st, 2021 with the creation of the Affordable Connectivity Program. The ACP provides up to $30 a month in a subsidy discount on internet services to eligible households, $75 for tribal land, and a one-time discount for up to $100 for a laptop, tablet, or desktop. Furthermore, some households will be eligible, according to their providers, for low-cost service plans that may be fully covered by the ACP. NHMC believes the FCC should create the lowest barriers for eligible consumers to transition from EBB to ACP and increase outreach from itself as well as from advocacy organizations, which have direct connections to their communities. So again, I wish to thank you for taking the time to join us for this discussion, and let's get started with our panel. As I recently just mentioned, the EBB was an emergency program in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I wish to discuss some of the lessons learned from the EBB when it came to the implementation of the ACP and how outreach efforts could improve moving forward. Specifically, Alejandro, I would like to get your perspectives. Specifically, can you describe some of the lessons you learned during the implementation of the EBB and your previous position that you have brought now to the FCC for the implementation of the ACP?
Well, Martin, yes. First of all, thank you guys for having me. It's great to be in community with NHMC and with you. This is such an important and timely conversation. Like Martin mentioned, my name is Alejandro Roark, and I serve as the Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau at the Federal Communications Commission. For those unfamiliar with our work, the FCC is an independent federal agency responsible for implementing and enforcing America's communication laws and regulations. My bureau specifically is responsible for developing and implementing the Commission's consumer policies, including disability access, as well as serving as the public face of the Commission through outreach, education, and through our Consumer Complaint Center, which is responsible for responding to consumer inquiries and complaints. So before joining the FCC, I led a CEO roundtable of national Latino civil rights organizations who were working in partnership to promote access, adoption, and the full utilization of technology and telecommunications resources by the Latino community across the United States. So I think to your question, the global health crisis really exposed the depth of the digital divide and the important and essential role that broadband plays in sustaining critical aspects of our everyday lives. I think as infection rates rose, so did the digital fault lines between those that have at-home internet connection and those that don't. And I think what we learned through the pandemic is that, only 65% of Latino households have an at-home broadband connection, making us some of the least connected across the country, along with tribal communities and other kind of Black and Brown and API communities across the country. They also found that the internet is having access to internet at home is directly correlated to a household's average household income. So those earning less than $50,000 a year are the least likely to have a broadband subscription at home. And I think for the purposes of this conversation, it's worth noting the median household income for Latino households in 2019 was $56,000 a year, and that number went down in 2020. So I think the good news is that Congress really responded quickly and established the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, which gave low-income or cost-sensitive consumers the ability to have a little bit of financial relief to be able to connect to the internet. And it really reduced the affordability barrier, which is the number one most cited reason why some of our community members don't have internet at home. So with all of that kind of being said, at HGTP, where I worked before, we realized that, it was not only important that and significant that this new program was established, but that we really worked to ensure that the Latino community, which is the community that organization served, really had wraparound support service at every step of that enrollment process, not just to technical assistance, filling out the enrollment application, but providing helpful tips and tricks on how to find and select an internet service provider, and also how to select a service plan that meets the family's needs and their long-term budget. So I think that all of those things were critical pieces in order for the Latino community to be able to successfully enroll in the program and receive the subsidy. But I think, and we're gonna have our other kind of panelists speak to these issues as well, but ensuring that we also have easy to understand, easily digestible in-language resources. We established a national public awareness campaign in both English and Spanish, and that I think was really important to ensuring that our community not only knew about the program, but had a one-stop shop where they could really explore, ask questions, and tap into video content to walk them through every step of the enrollment process.
Thank you, Alejandro. And on that same point, I know that Alisa, Valentin, you used to work at the FCC. I know you're now with National Urban League. So I would also like to get your perspectives kind of on the flip side of things. Since Alejandro came from an organization to the FCC, you came from the FCC and now you're in an organization. So from your previous work in the FCC and during the implementation of EBB, what were some of the challenges in reaching out to communities of color? And now from an outside perspective, how has that improved?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. Thank you to my friends at NHMC for inviting me to speak on this panel today. So yeah, as you mentioned, before I joined the National Urban League a few months ago, I was working at the FCC in the office of Commissioner Jeffrey Starks. And as many folks know, Commissioner Starks is the only commissioner of color at the FCC. And I think, what I'm most proud of as relates to the work that I did in his office and the work that continues now that I'm gone is he does a great job of centering the issue of affordable, reliable broadband access and adoption. It's a civil rights issue, right? And that's what he often talks about. He's been talking about that for years. And I think that helps us to center people of color. It helps us to center low-income communities in this conversation, which that hasn't always been the case, especially prior to the pandemic. But as it relates to, outreach to communities of color, I think we have to have an honest conversation about the trust that people have with the federal government, right? Historically, communities of color, and even presently, do not trust the federal government, and for good reasons. And so I think that it's really important that there are trusted messengers, because if you have the government saying, hey, here's this free internet that you can get. We've done such a great job of informing people about, possible, scams and things that are out there. We're always all getting robocalls. We probably have received a few today or received scam texts today. It's really hard to kind of break through all of that. So it's really important for there to be trusted messengers. And what I would also say is that something that should have been put into place a long time ago is interagency coordination, right? That should have been put in place with the Lifeline program years ago, so that you could just build on that infrastructure. And there was definitely bits and pieces there, but I think that could have definitely been some stronger infrastructure there that could have been easily built upon. And I know that there's a lot of interagency coordination going on now with the Affordable Connectivity Program, which I think is great, and that should definitely continue. People shouldn't have to, go, one place in order to learn about, food stamps, another place, to learn about, Pell Grants, things of that sort. You should be informed of all the full suite of services that are available to you if you are someone who is receiving federal benefits. And I would also say, what I know Chairwoman Rosenworcel was mentioning this recently at an event that she spoke with the Leadership Conference. Hopefully soon we'll be hearing more about that $100 million grant program. I think that is going to be really, really important to help organizations like National Urban League, get the word out about the program, because of the fact that we are a trusted organization. Our affiliates are trusted across the country as well. And also I would just add that it's great to have Alejandro working there now, and that is a big change. As someone who is a Latino, someone who came from the public sector, I think it's so important that he's in that position. And also he's a millennial, so he's doing cool things. So yes.
Yes, thank you, Alisa. And on that note, and Alejandro touched on it a little bit, specifically when it came to mainly non-English speaking communities and the migrant community. I would like to get your perspective, Emily, in regards to how the importance of the EBB and now the ACP, its importance to migrant non-English speaking communities when it came to their work, their education, their healthcare. And can you speak on some of those lessons learned and regarding non-English speaking households and how we can provide better outreach?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again to NHMC for hosting, especially Martin for facilitating this really important conversation. And I'll echo Alejandro, thank you so much for all the incredible work you are currently doing at the FCC. And Alisa, thank you so much for your public service up until now. And we are very lucky to have you back on this side, because there's plenty of work for us to be doing on the advocate side. So as all of the speakers have alluded to already, the pandemic really demonstrated once and for all what we already knew, which is that the internet is an essential service for our households, and that like with any other essential service, unfortunately those who lack access to it most of the time are those who are the most marginalized, who are already discriminated against, who already don't have great economic status or the ability to retain resources, information, stay in touch with communities. So they're already a vulnerable group, and what we saw during the pandemic is that because they were already vulnerable, they became even more vulnerable during the pandemic. So we do want to note, this isn't a new problem. We've always had Asian American, Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiians rely on the internet as a good. So we have English as a second language education programs that are only available online for students who are in rural areas. Medical care translations often happen online, and for a lot of folks where their English proficiency isn't good enough to go to their local hospital, they really rely on those services to be able to get the care that they need. Our communities have especially always relied on internet services to stay in touch with community. Many of our folks are first generation immigrants and still need to use internet to stay in touch with their family members and community members back in the motherland overseas. Getting information when you first immigrate, you get it from your community because that's who you trust, and we're seeing lots of folks use the internet to communicate that information now. So you can imagine when they don't have internet, folks are fighting harder to survive and don't have all the great resources they need. And we saw that with even EBB. We're trying to push it out, because it's the pandemic. A lot of the folks we would normally have on the ground, meeting people in person, in churches and community centers and schools and libraries, weren't able to do that. So we're out here trying to promote an online subsidy subsidy for online services rather online to folks who don't have online access. And so that was one of the greatest challenges, which, we had to adapt like everyone else did during the pandemic. But I'd say, one of the things we need to make sure that we do is provide in language services, access and translations at every single step of registration. So it's not just enough to have resources translated about ACP, right? Like we need to make sure that applications can eventually be made available in more languages, not just English and Spanish like they are now. We need PSAs, we need radio ads, billboards, bus bench advertisements. Really meet the people where they are, like Alisa mentioned, use those trusted messengers who are already embedded in the community. Make sure that we're testing language access at every step to make sure that the materials that are actually translated are actually accessible and make sense in language, because one of the lessons, as Martin knows, that we learned during EBB implementation is that often the translations are correct, but they're still not understandable to the targeted audience. So making sure that we run that through with community members and ask them, does this make sense? Were you able to sign up for internet with these instructions? And continuing to iterate that process to make sure we're meeting the community where they are, instead of expecting them to hear about the program somehow, find internet access somehow when they don't have it yet, and figure out themselves how to sign up. So really meeting them where they are, because we know that the pandemic isn't over. There's still a lot going on with folks, and our people are really just trying to survive. And the last thing I'll mention is the need for better data. So we're continuing to work on this. I know Alejandro is doing a lot of work at the FCC to improve on this, but EBB, like it states in the name, was an emergency program, so we couldn't do anything but meet the immediate need. But with ACP, we really hope that we can get a better understanding of who needs internet, why they're having problems signing up, and where they're located, so that we can target our efforts better, and make sure we fully understand the need and the lived experiences of those we're trying to serve before we push out our programming. Thanks.
Thank you, Emily. And yes, on that point, especially informing our community, one thing we have to do going forward is informing them about the changes in the ACP program compared to the EBB program. Obviously, when it comes to the subsidy amount, but also when it comes to eligibility. Currently, households are eligible to enroll in the ACP if their income is below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines, or if somebody in the household currently received a government benefit like Medicaid, SNAP, WIC, Pell Grants, or free and reduced price school lunch or breakfast. However, there's still a bit of confusion as to what might constitute a household and other potential limits to the ACP. Alisa, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, as you might be aware, in many cities, there are multi-dwelling buildings which are prevalent, where there may be families that share the same physical address, but do not necessarily share the same household. This might occur where there's a physical address, but the house or the building has different levels, and different generations of the same family may even reside in the same address. But again, none of the bills are shared, and basically for all intents, they're different apartments or dwellings. Can you explain how the ACP resolves these issues? And can you elaborate a little bit more as to what constitutes a household?
Yeah, sure. I think that's really, a good question, because this is another example of it, the importance of, government being, culturally responsive, right? And culturally aware, because in plenty of communities of color, there are different generations, living within the same household. So the FCC defines a household as a group of people who live together and share money, even if they are not related to each other. So an example of a household would be, a married couple who lives together. They would have to share one ACP benefit, or a parent and guardian and child who live together. They would share one ACP benefit, or an adult with friends or family who provide financial support and must share one ACP benefit. But there's also examples of kind of like multiple households, like you just said, said, living kind of at the same address. So for example, if there are 4 roommates who live together but don't necessarily share money, then there can be 4 households that receive the ACP benefit, which I think speaks to the question that you just asked. But yes, and I always encourage folks, if they want to, learn more about kind of like the ins and outs, definitely visit, affordableconnectivity.gov. And as Alejandro knows, that you all have amazing worksheets there that kind of spell everything out. And I think it's important also for there to continue to be kind of like digital navigators that can help, answer these sorts of questions, because sometimes this stuff gets a little complicated.
Yes, thank you, Alisa. And a little bit to jump off from that point, one issue that we always have to do is, especially when ACP enrollment, is to provide actual identification and providing alternate forms of documentation. Emily, could you speak about, and this is something that we've worked on for the EBB as well as for the ACP, but I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more on the importance of ACP's ability to provide alternate forms of identity documentation, such as an ITIN number or the driver's license number. And can you elaborate on how that can impact those who are differently documented, those who have come from mixed status families, or those who have a low digital literacy, or even those who don't want to share very sensitive information, such as social security number?
Right, absolutely. I think one of the goals with ACP is to make sure that all households who are eligible are going ahead and taking advantage of the benefit. So really the idea is to make sure we're getting rid of any potential barriers or areas where like people might hesitate. And we also want to expand access as much as we can and extend eligibility to everyone we can. And so with ACP, the way it's been written by Congress, citizenship is not a requirement, and the purpose of a form of identification is not to dictate whether someone is eligible or not, but to verify that they are who they say they are when they're applying online. So it's really to make sure that you are who you say you are when you're filling out the online application, not to determine whether you are eligible or not. So if that is the purpose of your, piece of identification, it makes sense that we should be accepting of all forms of identification that can simply do that, verify that you are who you say you are, which means that a social security number is not a requirement. It's simply, you can use the last 4 digits of social security number to verify your identity, but it's only to verify your identity, not to confirm your citizenship or anything else. And so this is really important because, like several of the speakers on this panel have already mentioned, there are varying levels of trust in federal government. So when we're thinking especially about families who are more vulnerable, they have reason to mistrust the government because throughout history, in instances where they've had to turn in their personal information, there have often been negative consequences or reasons that the government has been thought, we have reason to believe the government has used it for other purposes. So the folks that we're trying to serve might have reason to be skeptical of government. So we want to make sure that the process is not just easy and accessible, but also requires the least amount of sensitive data possible that they need to contribute in order to be eligible for the program. We'll also add that we want to make sure that we are addressing the issue of mixed documentation or differently documented family members, and making it clear that just because the entire household is not necessarily documented through a social security number does not disqualify them from being eligible for the program. So we want to be mindful of those mixed families who may have certain fears or reasons to be skeptical. And we also want to, on just ease, and Alisa mentioned interagency working on this, a lot of the other programs that folks can qualify for ACP through, such as the Women, Infant, and Children Supplemental Nutrition Program, don't require a social security number to be eligible for those programs. So if someone is already eligible for a program like that, they should be able to just transfer over their eligibility. And if they didn't need a social security number for a different program, they shouldn't need one for ACP. So it's really just making it more convenient, making folks more comfortable, making it more accessible and easy to sign up.
Thank you, Emily. And on that note, I want to just jump over to you, Alejandro. Since all these issues, we have to inform the public. And as the ACP is a federal program, I know the FCC is working to inform different communities across the country with different languages, different consumption of media sources about their eligibility for the program. As of, I believe, June 6th, there's over 12 million households enrolled in the ACP program. How has the FCC's efforts been focused on historically marginalized communities across the 50 states, but also in the U.S. territories such as Puerto Rico, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands? If you could please elaborate on that as well.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, I gotta give kudos to Chairwoman Rosenworcel and her leadership team. For context, they stood up the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program in literally 60 days. So the entire program, the application process, translating all of the resources into multiple languages, that was such a big lift. And then I think that I'm lucky enough now to come into this program with the benefit of all the work and the foundational work that they've done. And now I and my team are really kind of going through and doing, like Emily said, let's review, I think, a lot of the language translations. Let's make sure that it's not just a literal translation, but that it has that cultural resonance that really, I think, is being able to successfully communicate to the intended audience information about this program. And we've been doing a lot of ongoing kind of outreach, both for the EBB and the ACP. And honestly, again, I have to just extend a huge thank you to NHMC, to NUL, to AAJC, to all of our 1,300 outreach partners that really have been helping us and been at the table with us, ensuring that everybody knows that this program exists. All of that being said, we know that there's still kind of like work to do, even though we've reached that kind of like 12.3 million milestone, which I think is something that we should all be very excited about and should all kind of celebrate. We are now kind of ready and like Alisa mentioned, Chairwoman Rosenworcel announced for the first time yesterday the establishment of our grant outreach program. We really want to ensure that we are amplifying existing outreach and supporting and developing a program that supports new kinds of community engagement based on what all of our outreach partners know to be effective. We sought comment on this process and we're actively reviewing that record. And that is all informed by you. You all submitted comments on what you think should be included in the structure of a grants program to ensure that that we're not leaving anybody behind, and that we're building both outreach capacity within the agency and within kind of like our outreach partners. There's also a ton of work that has been going, like again, Alisa mentioned, she stole all of my talking points, all of our intergovernmental agreements. At this point, every federal agency that is managing or overseeing a program that makes somebody automatically eligible for the Affordable Connectivity Program, like Medicaid, like SNAP, all of them are sending out email blasts, doing dedicated outreach, ensuring that they are embedding. We developed a new pre-qualifying widget that all of these federal agencies are embedding into their websites, providing information directly to their constituent groups, to ensure that everybody that again already is participating in maybe another federal program is either can easily enroll, knows about the program, and knows about the technical support that's out there. So those are just a couple of our kind of new streams of work that have kind of happened in the way that we're getting the word out and really looking to dive and to reach people deeper into communities. We're also thinking through what does a paid and earned media strategy look like. That's also something that we will be kind of standing up in the following months. Once we've kind of done this whole holistic kind of program review, let's really give it some paid and earned media in multiple languages across the country to ensure that people can't escape the fact that the ACP program exists, that it is something that is available to a lot of people, cost-sensitive consumers that we know aren't connected, not because they don't understand the value of being connected, not because they don't want to be connected, but that really where price has been the primary barrier to access. We know that the majority of Americans live in places where there are at least one, or two kind of broadband service offerings, but unfortunately, not everybody is able to afford those offerings. So the ACP program goes a long way to ensure that everybody is able to benefit from, I think, the transformative kind of power of the internet economy and the upward economic mobility that affords to our communities and to households across the country.
Thank you, Alejandro. And yes, on that same point, when it comes to outreach going forward, NHMC believes that we have to continue to think in unique and innovative means to inform consumers and increase enrollment overall, specifically to historically marginalized communities that may not be aware of the program or are hesitant to enroll in a government subsidy. So we believe that we must properly inform our communities about the program. On that note, Emily, can you speak a little bit on some of the changes and additions to the ACP from EBB, such as the amount of the subsidy and the inclusion of the subsidy for devices, which was a new addition to the ACP?
Sure, I'm happy to. So first, we're very happy that the ACP is a long-term program. The EBB was essential, but it was in the name an emergency program, and we know some folks were hesitant to sign up because it wasn't a program that was guaranteed to continue. So we hope that the longevity of this program is going to encourage more folks to enroll because it no longer has a stated end date that EBB had. We also want to note the change that with EBB, households who were eligible if their income was 135% or less of the federal poverty level, that has increased to 200%. So many more households are now eligible under that eligibility requirement. Unfortunately, those who were negatively financially impacted by the pandemic, who were eligible with their demonstration of loss from the pandemic, were eligible for EBB, but will no longer be eligible for ACP if that is how they were eligible before. But we are very excited that the subsidy will be giving eligible households $35 a month for their internet, $75 if they are on tribal land, which for the API community, it's important to note that that includes Native Hawaiian protected land. And like you mentioned, the $100 for device, which does require some contribution from the consumer, but it's going to alleviate a lot of the costs when it comes to devices. So we're really excited and thankful for the FCC and everyone else's work in making sure that the ACP is a longer-term program that's going to continue to provide an essential subsidy for our low-income households.
Thank you, Emily. And yes, one other thing that I want to lead off to, and Alejandro, this question is for you. It's not necessarily a change in the program, but something recently that the administration announced that is going to help a lot of consumers that even might have been hesitant to try to get broadband services, even with the $30 subsidy. As you're aware, and I hope our viewers are aware as well, on May 9th, the Biden-Harris administration secured commitments from 20 leading internet service providers to offer ACP-eligible households a high-speed internet plan for no more than $30 a month. Alejandro, I was wondering if you can speak on the importance of that commitment for families that are already facing financial and economic hardships. And can you speak on the methods the FCC is informing our communities through the FCC's online toolkit and other outreach strategies?
Yeah, well, that was a really exciting announcement, and kind of a little bit of, I'll take your question in two separate work streams. So the White House was able to convene some of a good kind of slate of large, medium, small, urban, rural internet service providers to come together and say, look, to commit to offering a $30 low-cost plan that is a high-quality plan, meaning that I think that it's 100 down, 20 megs up, which I barely know what that means. So, I'm sure that we can get some information about that, but it's good speeds that I think meets a typical kind of household's needs. And, at that $30 price point, it allows, when used or when paired with the Affordable Connectivity Program, it makes it so that there's no out-of-pocket cost for that internet service, which is incredible. And so I'll also kind of preface and say that there are, although there's that suite of, I think, was it 20 internet service providers that are a part of that announcement, there's also an entire kind of suite of other internet service providers that also provide low-cost plans. And that list is also available at affordableconnectivity.gov. So people can kind of browse and see which providers are available in their communities. But I think that's just such a great announcement, because I remember thinking when the EBB was established, and just kind of noticing how much my internet service cost, and then how much the broadband subsidy cost. And I just thought there's still such a big gap there, right? In order to really have the type of internet connectivity that we all know that we need for just everyday life. And so I think that this announcement made it really clear that these low-cost plans are also high-quality, high-speed plans. And so they have an entire kind of framework set up where people can explore. And I think that is, their website is getinternet.gov. That's to kind of learn more about that White House initiative. And anybody that wants to explore kind of deeper information about the program or access the kind of various toolkits, you can also always get information at affordableconnectivity.gov, which is the official kind of like application portal that's been open and ready to receive an enrollment for a while now. But with those two kind of like efforts combined, people have now a real kind of choice and a real avenue to subscribe to at-home broadband, and that I think is something that we can all again celebrate and continue to promote, because it's a big deal for families that we know are historically unserved or underserved, or just really are working to stretch that dollar every month. So this is a much needed relief and package that's available to people now.
That's great, and thank you, Alejandro. Alisa, I want to direct this final question to you. Specifically, as Alejandro mentioned, some of the grants and some of the opportunities between the FCC and organizations such as ours, such as National Urban League, NHMC, and Asian Americans Advancing Justice. So can you elaborate and speak on the importance of the partnership between the FCC and advocacy organizations, which have direct connections to historically marginalized communities?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's really important for the FCC to continue being, proactive in engaging with advocacy organizations like ours. We really appreciate that. And also, it's really important for us to have folks that we can go to at the FCC if issues arise. It's kind of like an open door policy, virtual open door policy with the folks at the FCC, which we also really appreciate. And, I know everyone here has worked with, or in Martine's case, still works with Dacry Ryan of Nethica Lab. And one thing she told me months ago is that she has the abuela test. She's like, is this simple enough for my grandmother to understand, right? Is it culturally relevant to my grandmother? And it's organizations like ours that know, what that messaging needs to look like. We know what the messaging pitfalls are as well. And as for the National Urban League, like I mentioned earlier, we have 92 local affiliates. We serve about 2 million people per year. And again, that whole like free internet through the government, that messaging doesn't work for everyone, right? And we're not a monolithic group. Different messaging works for different folks. So I think that, it's really important for, organizations like ours. We're always in the communities. We're helping people, gain skills for jobs. We re-skilled for new jobs, or actually get a final kind of job and get that, reoccurring paycheck that helps improve their lives. If they trust us as it relates to getting a job, they trust us when we're talking about something like the Affordable Connectivity Program. But as we've stated at the Urban League and submitted comments to the FCC, it's really important for us to be able to have those resources to conduct this vital outreach. So yeah.
Thank you, Alisa. And we're about to wrap up, so I would like to provide our panelists closing remarks. Alejandro, would you like to start out?
I feel like I've been talking so much. Well, I just want to acknowledge that we consistently throw so much information at our audiences that are tuning in. But I am excited about this moment. I'm excited about the Affordable Connectivity Program. I'm really looking forward to being able to invest and partner more directly with a lot of our civil rights organizations who really, like Emily and Alisa and NHMC, how you guys all kind of mentioned and underscored, you guys have a direct kind of understanding and relationship with the people that we want to reach. And so I think for us is, how do we really give you guys, a little bit of wind in your sails so that you can really take that outreach to the next level? And also at the same time, how can we continue to build, I think, a support structure within the FCC that allows us to reach deeper and to partner more directly with our civil rights community often, and in a way that really, I think, not only is a one-way street where we're giving you information, but we really are, I think, inviting you in and your perspectives in to help inform the policy decisions of the agency. So I think I'll leave you guys by just sharing that I said yes to working at the FCC because, we right now have a chairwoman, the first ever in history, that really understands it. It's not just talk. She really is committed to building these structures, to partnering with people, to being in community. I think that you'll see her a lot across the country over the course of the next few years. And those doors are open. So if you guys have any events in your area where you would like the FCC to be, or you would like the chairwoman to be, we are more than happy to kind of plug that into our schedule of events. And we invite you to reach out. My door's always open, and you can find me on the internet, fcc.gov/consumers. But very happy to be here again with you guys, and thank you again for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Alejandro. And Alisa, would you like to give some closing remarks?
Yes, sure. I do want to invite your audience to look up our Lewis Latimer plan for digital equity and inclusion. And in that plan, we talk about the importance of affordability. So I definitely invite folks to go check that out on our website. And I think lastly, I would just say, we're living in an unprecedented moment in our nation's history. And I think that calls for unprecedented leadership and coordination between the government, between civil rights organizations, other public interest organizations, as well as industry. And I think, all of us on this call, and I'm sure, many other folks out there, we want this program to be successful. And, with, rising income inequality, I would say that, we definitely want this program to exist far into the future as well. We're definitely going to be doing our part at the National Urban League, and we look forward to continuing to work with all of you as well.
Thank you, Alisa. Thank you, Alisa. And Emily, would you like to give some closing remarks as well?
Sure. First, I'd just like to express gratitude. This is something that a lot of advocates have been pushing for a very, very long time before the pandemic. And it took a lot of stakeholders putting a lot of effort in to get it done. Like Alejandro said, for the EBB, really, really quickly. And with the ACP, we're still learning while we do it. But I know folks are really committed to making sure that we center the experiences and needs of those who are most marginalized. So I'm just really thankful to be in this space with all of you, not just today, but in this work that we're continuing to do. And yeah, I'd like to just remind folks who work on this of that our communities have to be not just centered, but also listened to, right? They should be taking direction, giving us feedback, telling us what doesn't work, and we need to be willing to listen to them, not just so we can say we have the input and buy-in of community members, but throughout the process from beginning to end. And when I say the end, you know, the work continues after everyone has affordable access to great internet. We want to make sure that digital equity continues, that we're focusing on digital literacy, education, making sure folks have jobs that are going to be high paying, high skilled, because they know how to use the internet really well now. So we want to continue imagining a better world for all of us, and seeing how technology can be a tool of liberation for us all instead of just something that we're constantly scrambling to reduce the negative externalities of, right? So just grateful for this space and reminded that we have more work to do, but as long as we center a community and focus on serving them, I think we'll just be fine. So thank you again, Martin and NHMC, for hosting and inviting us to join today.
Thank you, Emily. We really appreciate it. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation today. It truly motivates me to keep the fight to close the digital divide and to provide affordable, reliable broadband services to historically marginalized communities. So again, thank you again to all our panelists for taking the time out of their busy schedules to chat with us today, and to our audience for staying connected to this issue. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and to watch more episodes just like these, don't forget to follow up on our social media platforms. And for more information on our organization, please visit nhmc.org. Thank you, and see you next time.